Decide here and now that you will stop living the same way every day. You already know why your life feels stuck. It's not because you lack ability, it's because you keep repeating the same routine, the same excuses, and the same mindset. You've said, "I'm done," before, and nothing changed because you didn't follow through. You didn't keep the commitments you made to yourself. You didn't stay consistent. You didn't push through when things got uncomfortable. This isn't a pep talk to lift you for a few minutes. This is a clear, direct plan to transform your days over the next 3 weeks with practical steps and relentless execution. You don't need perfect systems or endless motivation. What you need is to stop letting time slip away and to stop breaking promises to the one person you have to live with, yourself. If you give these 21 days everything you've got, you won't only feel different, you'll be different. People will notice how fast you changed. This is the method to become someone no one expects. Admitting you've been living the same life is one of the hardest truths to accept. Day after day you repeat familiar patterns because you assume change will come someday, when conditions are perfect. The truth is the perfect moment never arrives. Real change begins the day you commit fully to being different. It begins when staying the same feels more painful than the discomfort of change. That decision, the honest, heavy one, is where your new life starts. You don't need another list of motivational quotes, another app, or another course. You need the kind of resolve that wakes you up earlier, makes you finish what you started, forces you to say no to what undermines you, and compels you to say yes to what pushes you toward growth. Gradual improvement begins with one deliberate change today. Deciding is not about feeling ready. Most people never feel ready. If you wait for readiness, you'll wait forever. Move when you're tired. Act when it's hard. Choose when it's uncomfortable. Habits exist to preserve the status quo, and your current routine is designed to keep you exactly where you are. The version of you everyone recognizes is comfortable precisely because it has been consistent. The unrecognizable version shows up when you say, "I'm not doing this anymore." No more late starts. No more skipping the work. No more blaming circumstances. Make the decision and then anchor it with discipline. You don't owe explanations. You don't need to announce your plan. You simply have to do the work every day, quietly, consistently, fully. Talent is not what separates those who rise from those who remain. Commitment is. The people who succeed are the ones who refuse to revert. This transformation won't be visible overnight. It starts with small daily choices that compound into a different identity. When the old you would hit snooze, the new you gets up. When the old you would avoid the workout, the new you shows up. When the old you would procrastinate, the new you acts now. Those opposing choices, repeated day after day, begin to alter how you speak, stand, and move. Others will notice the energy change before they notice the surface changes. Your decisions get sharper, your focus intensifies, and your presence becomes unfamiliar because it no longer matches the patterns people expect. You'll know you've changed when your actions no longer align with the person you were last week. People will ask why you seem different. That discomfort from others is a sign you're on the right track. You must be ruthlessly honest about where you are and where you want to be. Ask yourself, am I proud of how I spend my time? Am I proud of how I treat my body, my relationships, and my responsibilities? If not, end that chapter immediately. You've survived the old version of yourself, now choose to outgrow it. That decision carries weight and forces movement. It makes excuses feel thin and unconvincing. You don't need to explain yourself publicly. You need to keep your word privately. That kind of integrity creates momentum. People might doubt you, and some will try to keep you in the version of yourself they're used to. That's not your problem. Your work happens when no one is watching. Your commitment holds when it is no longer exciting. Start by identifying the single habit that eats your potential every day. You already know what it is, the small behavior you excuse away that slowly drains your time, energy, and focus. It might be endless scrolling, impulsive eating, procrastination, or talking yourself out of action with justifications. It's not about fixing everything at once. Big change begins by removing one obvious anchor. Break that one habit utterly and replace it with a better response to the same trigger. Interrupt the cycle of trigger, action, and reward by choosing the harder option that leads to longer-term pride instead of momentary pleasure. Expect resistance. The voice that says, "Just this once," will try to sabotage you. Every time you give in, your belief in yourself weakens. Each time you push through, you build a new identity. Missing a day isn't the end. Quitting is. Fight back daily. Be consistent. Prove to yourself that you control your life one decision at a time. Fear sits in the background of most people's lives, quiet and persuasive. It whispers that you're not ready, that you should wait, that rejection will hurt too much. When fear dominates, you'll choose safety over growth and comfort over the discomfort that precedes transformation. Growth happens when you do the thing that scares you. You don't remove fear, you act in spite of it. Courage is not a feeling you wait for, it's something you earn by repeatedly confronting the things you avoid. Start with one uncomfortable action, a difficult conversation, an important call, or a task you've postponed. Do it without lengthy planning, even if your hands shake. The habit of leaning into discomfort builds a new standard for how you move through the world. You stop seeking guarantees and begin to trust your ability to figure things out on the way. The way you speak to yourself when no one else hears is the bedrock of all change. Private language shapes private choices. If your inner monologue is harsh and undermining, you will sabotage progress no matter how many external habits you adopt. This is not about fake positivity, it's about truthful, constructive self-talk that supports action. Replace destructive sentences with steady, realistic statements like, "I'm learning," and "I can handle this." Treat your inner voice like a coach, not an enemy. When setbacks happen, speak in a tone that keeps you moving rather than tearing you down. Those small shifts compound. People who grow fastest are not innately immune to doubt. They've learned to manage the voice inside so it stops steering them toward stagnation. You don't need to be loud about it. Quiet, consistent internal alignment fuels the most reliable progress. Protect your time like it's the most valuable currency you own. Most people act as if hours are endlessly replaceable, but every minute you give away to meaningless habits compounds into a life that feels empty. You don't need a better planner. You need better boundaries and better choices about who and what gets your attention. Audit your days. See where hours dissolve into noise. Stop saying yes out of guilt or habit. Saying no is not selfish, it's necessary. Each yes costs something important. Guard your best hours for the things that push you forward. Wake earlier to claim focus time before the world demands your energy. Remove distractions that erode your evenings and protect your mental space. The people who win don't have more time, they refuse to waste it. Work on yourself when nobody notices. The real work is done in the silent, invisible hours when applause is absent. Show up on days when you don't feel like it. Build habits that are independent of external validation. This is where character is forged. The grind without recognition cultivates discipline, patience, and the kind of momentum that lasts. Your private consistency becomes public advantage. You won't always feel progress in the moment, but the accumulation of small, disciplined actions creates undeniable results. Validate yourself by keeping your promises and finishing the projects you start. Eventually, your results will make explanations unnecessary. By then, you'll know why you committed and you won't need anyone else's approval. Momentum grows in silence. Protect that process. Turn pain into fuel instead of letting it become a cage. Everyone carries wounds, disappointments, and losses. The common response is to let pain freeze you, to replay the hurt until it defines your identity. The alternative is to use pain as a compass and a motivator. Feel what you need to feel, then choose how that experience will shape your future. Small actions, getting up earlier, moving your body, talking to someone who listens, organizing your space, are the first steps toward rebuilding order out of chaos. Pain does not disappear, but it can be transformed into purpose. The people who become strongest most often were shaped by hardship they refused to waste. Use your past as a reason to build, not to remain paralyzed. Each step you take in spite of the pain chips away at its power over you. Stop explaining yourself and start producing results. Words waste energy that could be invested in action. People who grow quickly stop arguing for their potential and instead let their work speak. When you keep explaining, you leak focus into managing opinions rather than improving skill. Save your energy for execution. Work in silence. When results arrive, skeptics fall silent. You don't owe anyone constant updates or justifications. Keep your commitments, do the hard work consistently, and let outcomes demonstrate your change. Real power is shown through discipline, not through explanations. Be the person who shows up, who builds, who proves quietly and consistently. That shift will concentrate your time, sharpen your focus, and increase the impact of every choice you make. You already made the decision to stop living the same day on repeat. Now it's time to identify the habits that quietly steal your progress and remove them with surgical precision. There is one habit you know better than anyone else, the one you excuse away, the one you rationalize as not that big of a deal, and the one that shows up every single day to steal minutes, focus, and momentum. This habit is not a trivial annoyance. It compounds. It creates a quieter, slower version of your life until one day you realize your days all feel the same. You won't change by attacking 10 problems at once. You'll change by ruthlessly eliminating the single habit that costs you the most. Focus on that one removal, and watch how the rest of your life begins to shift. Breaking a habit isn't about willpower alone. It's about interrupting the cycle. Recognize the trigger, refuse the automatic action, and replace it with a new response that leads to long-term pride rather than instant relief. For example, if doom scrolling is your go-to whenever you feel bored or stressed, commit to a different action the moment the urge hits. Get up, move, write a sentence toward a project, or make a short call to someone who keeps you accountable. The first attempts will feel unwieldy. Expect resistance. You will hear the inner voice arguing that just once won't matter. That voice is lying. Every one time chips away at your discipline. Each refusal strengthens a different future. Keep at it. The goal is not perfection but persistence. Missed days won't erase progress, but quitting will. Change the environment that enables the habit. Remove easy access to the things you want to stop doing. If eating poorly happens because junk food is visible and convenient, then put it out of the house or at least out of sight. If notifications are a constant drain, turn them off for large chunks of the day. Small environmental adjustments reduce friction toward better choices. Design your life so the default option nudges you toward growth instead of decay. This isn't about deprivation, it's about alignment. Your surroundings should support the person you want to become, not the person you used to be. Start measuring progress in terms of days you stuck to the new rule, not by grand overnight transformations. Track your wins and learn from the slips without making them sacred. When you fail, analyze quickly and change the plan. Failure is evidence, not destiny. It tells you what needs to be adjusted about your approach, your environment, or your triggers. Replace shame with curiosity. Ask what went wrong and what you can change to prevent a repeat. That curiosity removes the drama and keeps your energy on solutions rather than on self-punishment. Beyond breaking the single damaging habit, build a simple replacement ritual that gives you an immediate positive payoff. Humans repeat behaviors because of the reward. If you remove the negative action without adding a meaningful replacement, the urge will find a different outlet. Choose a replacement that aligns with your goals. Maybe 5 minutes of breathing followed by one small productive action, a walk that clears your head, or a short planning session that turns anxiety into a focused next step. The reward must be enough to pull you toward the healthier choice, especially in the early days when the new pattern feels foreign. Now expand your courage muscle. Fear is not an enemy to eliminate, it is a signal that you are about to expand. The silent fear that whispers "not yet" is the same signal that your potential is waiting on the other side. Choose the uncomfortable action that matters most and take it immediately. Speak up in the meeting, Send the message you've avoided, pitch the idea, call the person who could help you move forward. The first time your hands shake and you still follow through, something inside you hardens a little. That increment of courage stacks. Do this regularly, and the cumulative effect makes you far less reactive to fear and far more aligned with your true priorities. You will be tempted to wait for clarity before you act. Don't. Clarity emerges from motion. Action is the mechanism that sharpens thinking. As you move, decisions become clearer, priorities sort themselves out, and you gain the kind of momentum that creates its own evidence. Momentum is a feedback loop. It rewards you with confidence when you feed it with consistent decisions. To fuel it, choose a daily non-negotiable, something that you will do no matter how you feel. It could be a morning routine, a body movement, a writing habit, or a focused 60-minute work block. When that baseline holds, everything else aligns more easily. Your days stop being dictated by moods and instead become shaped by intent. Language shapes identity. The sentences you repeat to yourself are not harmless words, they are the scaffolding of your self-image. Don't tolerate a private narrative that undercuts your effort. Replace self-deprecating thoughts with factual, supportive statements. Stop catastrophizing small setbacks. When you miss a target, say that you learned something and you'll adjust. Practice quiet affirmations that are true and actionable. I am committed to this plan. I will take one focused step right now. I don't need perfection to make progress. That rationale steadies your mind and helps you make better choices consistently. Protect your calendar fiercely. Time is the arena where change actually happens. Most people leave their day open to the demands of others and then wonder why their ambitions go unmet. Learn to schedule by priority rather than by default. Book your most important work when your energy is highest. Create blocks where distractions are forbidden and guard them jealously. If a request does not respect your priorities, say no without long explanations. You'll face pushback early on. People test new boundaries. If someone genuinely values you, they adjust. If they don't, their absence reveals their misalignment with your future. That clarity is a gift. Work in silence until the results force recognition. The path of quiet execution is not glamorous, and it will make you feel invisible at times. That invisibility is your advantage. Use it to build competence without the pressure of public commentary. Execute with discipline and let the outcomes speak. When others finally see progress, their doubt will have no purchase. You will also save emotional energy by not seeking external approval for every small victory. Self-validation through consistent action is infinitely more reliable. Channel pain into constructive energy. Pain is a resource if you direct it. Convert frustration, hurt, and loss into urgency. Write those emotions down. Use them as a map that points to what matters most. Let the memory of what you don't want to feel again push you to act with seriousness. Don't let the past be a story that keeps you stuck. Let it be the fuel for the life you are building. The most resilient people don't pretend hurt didn't happen. They simply refuse to let it become the limiting factor. Stop explaining and start delivering. Explanations are often cover for inconsistency. The less you try to justify, the more you can produce. When asked about progress, respond with outcomes rather than excuses. This shift conserves energy and puts the emphasis where it belongs, on results. People who continuously produce don't need explanations. Their work does the talking. Adopt that posture and watch how the dynamics in your life change. There are moments that will demand you act when you don't feel ready. Those moments are the proving ground. Choose to act anyway. This is not reckless abandon. It's a disciplined refusal to be held hostage by comfort. You will discover that doing one hard thing reliably changes how you feel the next day, the week after, and the month beyond. Consistency compounds into a reputation that precedes you. When you show up in that way, you create opportunities not by asking but by showing what you can do. Be patient with the process while being ruthless with your standards. Patience is not passivity. It is steady application of high standards day after day. Keep your commitments, even on small things. Finish what you start. Over time, those small completions add up into a life that no longer resembles the one you walked away from. The people who become unrecognizable are simply the ones who applied discipline privately until their results demanded attention publicly. Now that you've removed the habit that was holding you back and started acting despite fear, the next step is to turn discomfort into your training ground. Growth does not come from staying comfortable. It comes from choosing the hard thing consistently and making it part of who you are. When you begin to seek out the moments that make you uneasy, you're intentionally expanding your capacity. That expansion is not sudden. It accumulates through repeated exposure to challenge until what once felt impossible becomes routine. The skill you build by doing what scares you isn't just bravery, it's practical competence. You learn how to act when your hands shake, how to hold a conversation when your voice trembles, how to keep working when your confidence is low. Those are the muscles that determine how fast you rise. Fear will always be present, but it should not be the director of your life. The point is not to eliminate it, but to move forward with it in your chest. The person who becomes unrecognizable is someone who experiences fear and chooses action anyway. Each time you do that, the fear loses a little of its authority. Your confidence grows not because circumstances are easier, but because your response changes. Instead of rehearsing reasons to stay small, you begin rehearsing the steps that move you forward. That shift in rehearsal changes everything about how you approach opportunities. You stop asking whether you're ready and start asking what you will do right now to make progress. Part of this work is learning to manage your inner voice so it becomes an ally instead of an enemy. The way you speak to yourself in private will either fuel your advancement or sabotage it. Harsh internal criticism is an energy drain. It makes you hesitant and defensive. It makes recovery slower when setbacks happen. The alternative is a clear, honest, and firm inner tone that keeps you aligned with your goals. Tell yourself the truth in a way that prepares you to act. Remind yourself of the facts. You've done hard things before, you can learn fast, and small consistent steps generate real change. Those statements don't require delusion. They require a steady, strategic attention to what actually helps you keep moving. Protecting your time remains central. Time is finite, and every minute you hand away is a minute you cannot invest in building your future. People who transform their lives choose their hours deliberately. They schedule high-value work when they are sharp and leave low-value tasks for times when their energy is naturally lower. They create boundaries so that their calendar reflects intention. Practically, this looks like blocking out distraction-free periods, starting the day with deliberate habits that prime performance, and saying no without guilt to requests that steal focus. If you want to accelerate progress, you must treat your schedule as sacred. That means making difficult choices about who and what gets access to your hours. Consistency beats intensity over the long run. Marathoners don't train by sprinting once, they train by showing up repeatedly. The same applies to your personal transformation. Predictable, small actions compound into huge changes. Don't mistake big bursts of effort for sustainable growth. The person who becomes unrecognizable is the one who respects the daily grind, who chooses the practice that sharpens skill and keeps showing up, even when the results aren't spectacular yet. Those repeated actions lay down an irreversible trajectory. Over time, habits replace willpower. When discipline becomes default, progress accelerates and identity shifts. You no longer try to be better, you simply are better by default. Work in seasons and set micro goals that are demanding but achievable. Thinking of transformation as a multi-year marathon can make each day feel insignificant, but breaking your time into intense sprint phases gives life urgency and focus. Choose a short, measurable objective. 3 weeks of consistent practice, 1 month of disciplined mornings, a focused period of learning, and then commit fully for that window. Short, intense seasons of dedicated work create evidence you can trust and provide the momentum to push further. The urgency of a defined time frame forces choices you might otherwise defer indefinitely. Use the pain you carry as a directional tool rather than a weight that pins you down. Everyone has wounds and regrets, but those experiences can clarify what you will no longer tolerate. Pain can sharpen your priorities if you let it. Convert that energy into practical steps that move you toward what matters. Channel anger, disappointment, and loss into disciplines that produce forward motion, commitments you honor, projects you finish, conversations you initiate. The point is not to be numb to pain, but to make it meaningful by turning it into action. That transformation is one of the most powerful forms of ownership you can practice. Silence your need for external validation by proving to yourself daily. Many people perform to be seen and praised, and that dependence on approval weakens resilience. Instead, learn to validate yourself through the consistency of your work. When you keep your word to yourself, that internal trust becomes a more stable and motivating force than any applause. The habit of finishing what you start creates internal proof that you can rely on. That proof matters more than any like, comment, or compliment because it changes how you feel about yourself when no one else is watching. Stop explaining your choices to those who do not share your priorities. Explanations are often wasted effort that siphon energy away from action. When you spend time trying to justify your progress to others, you lose time you could use to actually progress. It's not about being secretive, it's about being efficient with your energy. Save your words for execution. Actions are unarguable when they are steady and visible. Let your consistency do the work that words cannot. In time, your results will render explanations unnecessary. Develop rituals that anchor your day so you don't depend on motivation. Rituals, simple, repeatable sequences of behavior, create a baseline that makes good choices automatic. The specifics of the ritual are less important than the consistency. Whether it's a morning block reserved for focused work, a brief planning session at noon, or a wind-down routine each night, rituals reduce decision fatigue and free your mental energy for creative, high-value tasks. Over time, these rituals shape your identity. You become someone who acts according to a plan, not according to occasional inspiration. Finally, measure progress in terms of identity change rather than temporary wins. The goal is to be different on the inside so that your behavior follows naturally. Ask not only what you achieved this week but who you were becoming in the process. When your daily actions align consistently with a higher standard, the internal transformation becomes permanent. People notice the external changes, but the lasting shift is internal. That's why the most important work happens privately. Keep investing in the daily practices that rewire how you respond to fear, discomfort, and challenge. That steady investment creates the person who no longer needs to explain, who no longer waits for permission, and who moves through life with a clarity and force that surprises everyone, including yourself. Keep working when nobody notices. Real transformation is created in the private hours when no one applauds and no one is tracking your every move. Success is not built on public validation. It's forged in the lonely stretches of discipline, repetition, and quiet focus. Showing up when no one is watching trains you to rely on your own standards rather than the fleeting approval of others. That muscle, keeping your word to yourself when the world is silent, is what turns good intentions into lasting identity. If you want to rise, accept that much of the work will feel invisible at first. The lack of recognition is not a sign of failure. It's your chance to build something that cannot be given to you, only earned. Decide now to make your private practice non-negotiable. Create a baseline routine you will respect regardless of mood, weather, or external noise. This baseline can be small, but it must be sacred. The point is to build an internal anchor that keeps you moving when circumstances try to pull you off course. You will have days when energy is low and results seem nowhere in sight. That is precisely the time to honor the baseline. Each time you do, you reinforce the truth that you are trustworthy to yourself. That self-trust compounds into confidence, and confidence becomes the quiet engine that powers public outcomes later on. People often overestimate what they can do in one burst and underestimate what steady, private consistency compounds into over weeks. Protect your practices from distraction. The world is engineered to steal attention. Notifications, shallow social interactions, and the habit of reacting to every ping break focus and undermine momentum. Choose long stretches of undisturbed work. Set the environment so your default action is the one that serves your goals. Clear your workspace of items that pull you into passive comfort. Turn off non-essential notifications. Use the first hour of your day to do what matters most, when your reserves are fullest. This first hour is a leverage point. The actions you take early will shape the tone of the entire day. Don't waste it searching for motivation. Build a system that requires minimal decision and maximal execution. Learn to be comfortable with small, steady progress rather than instant notoriety. The culture of instant reward trains us to expect dramatic results quickly, and when those don't appear we get discouraged. Real mastery is made of incremental gains that, by themselves, look insignificant. Reframe the narrative. A single successful habit maintained consistently is more meaningful than a series of grand efforts that peter out. Track your days of adherence, not the occasional headline-worthy breakthrough. Over time, the accumulation of those steady days will create outcomes that look miraculous from the outside but were simply the logical result of patient application. Refuse to perform for approval. When you shift the motivation from external validation to internal standards, your energy becomes radically more sustainable. People who habitually act to please others lose their center because their actions depend on the presence of an audience. Instead, place your primary energy into tasks that deepen competence and move you toward your long-term objectives, even if no one sees the work. That repositioning is liberating because you no longer need permission to act. Permission is internalized when your daily actions align with your priorities and your standards are independent of applause. Be ruthless about eliminating time thieves. Most people think they're busy because they are productive, but busyness is often just a mask for unfocused energy. Conduct a ruthless time audit and identify where hours vanish without meaningful return. Stop tolerating activities that give temporary comfort but no lasting value. Replace them with focused work sessions or restorative practices that genuinely renew your capacity. The reclaiming of time is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters with clarity and intensity. When your calendar reflects your priorities, your life follows. Practice quiet confidence. Confidence built on external praise is fragile. Quiet confidence develops when your standards are met consistently, regardless of applause. This type of confidence shows up as calm decisiveness, composed energy, and an inner steadiness that others notice before your achievements are obvious. Quiet confidence is also less braggy and more effective. It invites trust because it's grounded in competence, not in performance for validation. Cultivate that steadiness by honoring commitments to yourself and finishing what you start. Let pain sharpen your purpose rather than harden you into cynicism. Everyone endures loss or disappointment, and those experiences can either close your heart or clarify what you will no longer accept. Choose clarity. Use difficult memories as reminders of why you must act differently. Channel the intensity into disciplined habits rather than into rumination. The angrier or sadder you feel about something from your past, the more direction you have for change. If you redirect the energy into practical sessions of work, learning, or rebuilding, that transmutation is not about erasing pain. It's about converting it into a resource that helps you reach the person you could become. Stop explaining away your potential and let results do the convincing. People who are serious about change stop rationalizing their delays and start producing evidence of progress. Explanations are often a cover for inconsistency. The time you spend defending choices or justifying delays is time you could have used to produce something real. When you decide to act and then act consistently, silence becomes your weapon. Instead of defending a plan, you will have a track record. Actions are indelible. They can be verified and measured in ways excuses never can. Let your achievements dismantle doubt, both the doubt of others and the doubt within you. Learn to say no to demands that steal your attention and dilute your focus. Saying no is not cruelty, it is self-preservation. Every yes has a cost, and that cost is often your most valuable currency: time. Protect your days by declining invitations and requests that don't align with your priorities. You don't owe long explanations for choosing to protect your attention. Clear, calm refusals will preserve your energy and create space for the work that matters. Over time, The quality of your days will increase as the clutter of unnecessary obligations disappears. Build rituals that make discipline automatic. Rituals remove the need for willpower because they set default behaviors in place. Establish a morning sequence that primes the day, a midday reset that keeps momentum, and an evening routine that allows for deliberate rest. These rituals should be short and repeatable so they can be sustained indefinitely. The goal is to create a scaffolding of small, reliable behaviors that channel your energy into productivity and rest in a balanced way. When rituals are consistent, your life acquires a rhythm that supports both performance and recovery. Cultivate a private standard that trumps external measurement. Many people chase metrics because they provide easy feedback, but metrics can also distract from deeper progress. Develop a personal measure rooted in character. Do you keep your word to yourself? Do you prioritize what matters over what's convenient? Are you becoming someone who acts with steady integrity? These internal metrics may be harder to quantify, but they are more powerful because they shape long-term outcomes. When your internal standard is high, external metrics will eventually follow, but even if they don't, you will have the quiet satisfaction of knowing you did what you promised. Practice immediate action as an antidote to overthinking. The longer you wait to act, the more opportunities you give to fear, doubt, and excuses. Decide on a next step and do it within minutes. That immediate movement is a signal to your mind and body that intention will be matched with action. Over time, that habit of promptness rewires you to be more decisive and less captive to indecision. Prompt action creates momentum. Momentum creates evidence. Evidence builds confidence. It is a simple but profound loop. Finally, accept that the path to becoming unrecognizable is not a performance but a reconstruction. You are not trying to impress others. You are remodeling your daily practices so you become someone who naturally gets different results. The outward change will follow the inward reconfiguration. Keep your energy where it matters. In your habits, your boundaries, your work ethic, and your ability to turn pain into fuel. This is not about temporary hustle. It's about becoming someone whose default behavior is excellence, discipline, and focus. That transformation will be noticed not because you announced it loudly, but because your life begins to reflect it unmistakably. Keep going when the lights are off and the applause is absent. The most meaningful work is done in ordinary hours, by ordinary effort repeated without fanfare. That quiet consistency is what separates those who talk about potential from those who actually become different. When you commit to showing up regardless of recognition, you build a capacity for self-leadership that cannot be borrowed or stolen. Your reputation will follow, but the core change begins in private, with the decisions you keep to yourself. The discipline of doing the necessary things, even when nobody sees them, creates an inner authority that rewires how you respond to challenges. Decide what you will protect in your day, and then protect it fiercely. Choose a single non-negotiable practice that signals your priorities, a focused hour of deep work, a movement routine that primes your energy, a short writing block that clarifies your thinking, and treat that hour like an appointment with your future. When you make these practices sacred, mood has less power over them. The days you feel flat are the days that matter the most. If you do the work on the hard days, you prove to yourself that your standards do not depend on how you feel. Over time, that proof becomes trust in your own ability to follow through. Refuse to be distracted by shallow comfort. The world offers easy escapes that feel productive in the moment, but leave you depleted in the long run. Social feeds, endless messages, low-value meetings, and one more episode are convenient ways to postpone the work of growth. Replace those habits with small rituals that foster long-term progress. Choose rest that renews, not escapes. Choose activities that build skill or clarity, even in small doses. The returns won't be dramatic at first, but they will compound into real progress when you stay consistent. Being selective about comfort is not deprivation, it is wisdom. When you hit resistance, don't escalate drama, escalate discipline. Resistance is predictable. It shows up as fatigue, distraction, doubt, and impatience. The response that produces growth is not emotional reactivity, it is measured, relentless action. Commit to the work and then apply systems that remove friction. Scheduled blocks, simple routines, and immediate tiny wins that shift your state. Build a checklist of the smallest, most impactful steps and do them even when energy is low. Action produces clarity, which produces momentum. Momentum then reduces resistance because movement begets movement. Let your inner voice become your coach. Many people have a habit of catastrophic self-talk that turns a single mistake into a broad justification for quitting. That voice is not an oracle, it is a habit shaped by fear. Replace it with a coaching voice that is honest and firm. A coach does not excuse poor performance but also does not define identity by a mistake. Say to yourself what an effective coach would say: identify the error, plan one corrective action, and then act. Coaching language keeps the mind practical and solution-focused, and it prevents self-criticism from becoming paralysis. Protect the quality of your attention more than the quantity of your activity. Too many people confuse busyness with progress. They measure days by how much they did instead of how much they moved the needle. The more you can concentrate your best energy on the highest leverage tasks, the faster you will change. Learn to schedule deep work when you are at your best, and defend those periods like they're critical meetings with your highest priority future. When your attention is focused, small amounts of time produce disproportionate results. Focus multiplies effort. Use pain as a precise instrument. Pain has weight, and that weight can either crush you or drive you forward. If you let pain become a rumination machine, it will immobilize you. If you use it as a diagnostic tool, it will clarify what must change. Write down the specific costs of continuing the habits that hurt you. Be concrete about the relationships, energy, and opportunities you lose when you stay comfortable. That clarity is fuel. It turns vague frustration into a directive. Do this different. Pain becomes a route map, not an identity. Follow it with discipline and your setbacks start to inform strategy instead of becoming excuses. Practice radical simplification. The more complicated you make your life, the more ways there are to stall. Break your goals into the smallest actions that produce measurable forward motion. Remove optional complexity that creates indecision. If a plan has more than a few critical elements, you will procrastinate. Simpler plans are easier to execute consistently. Simplicity creates speed. Speed produces feedback. Feedback creates correction. Correction produces improvement. This loop is efficient when the initial plan is focused and trimmed to essentials. Stop seeking permission through explanation. Explaining is often a disguised attempt to manage perceptions, to earn approval before results exist. That pattern keeps you small because it invests energy in persuasion rather than production. Instead, allocate that energy to building something undeniable. When you produce, you no longer need to persuade. Results are the most efficient and convincing language there is. Work quietly and let the outcomes do the convincing. This strategy conserves emotional energy and sharpens focus. Set short, intense windows of work that require full commitment. Long, vague goals invite delay. Short, defined sprints require accountability and foster urgency. Commit to a sprint for a week or 3 weeks where you remove distractions, prioritize one core project, and measure progress daily. During that window, your choices are limited: work or waste. That constriction actually clarifies decision-making and accelerates results. When the sprint ends, assess, adjust, and set the next target. Small sprints compound into large transformations because the structure forces choice and reduces the tendency to wait for someday. Build a defensive perimeter around your mornings. The beginning of the day is a leverage point that shapes how the rest unfolds. Choose a morning routine that primes clarity, energy, and momentum, and protect it from intrusion. Resist the seduction of immediate inbox checking or social noise. Instead, dedicate your opening hour to high-value work or restorative practices that set a tone of control. The rest of the day will follow the lead you set in the morning. If you start by reacting, you will spend the rest of the day being reactive. If you start by creating, you will spend the rest of the day moving toward outcomes. Replace vague goals with measurable habits. Saying, "I want to be better," is too soft. Defining specific actions that can be tracked tightens your ability to execute. Decide how many focused work blocks, movement sessions, or intentional conversations you will complete each week, and make the measure non-negotiable. Track it daily. Measurement removes moralization. It converts promises into data. Once your behavior is measurable, your progress becomes visible and correctable. This is the bridge between intention and real change. Lean into accountability relationships that demand honesty. Peer accountability is not about cheerleading, it's about truth-telling and shared standards. Find 1 or 2 people who will ask the hard questions and hold you to the commitments you've made. When others know your standard and will call you on slippage, your chances of staying consistent increase dramatically. Choose accountability partners who model the discipline you want to adopt and who care enough to be candid rather than polite. The right accountability raises your floor. Practice decisive small actions to break inertia. Big plans often stagnate because the first step feels ambiguous. Identify the smallest possible step that moves you forward and do it immediately. Action short-circuits dread. The physical movement of starting alters state and reduces the perceived size of the task. Momentum compounds. Every small action dissolves a piece of resistance and makes the next step simpler. Over time, this habit becomes an identity. You are somebody who acts quickly and purposefully. Guard your social circle from passive influences. People who consistently underperform will naturally push for comfortable patterns that preserve the status quo. If your close environment does not reflect growth, you will be dragged toward average by incremental influence. Surround yourself with people who raise standards through their actions and conversations. That doesn't mean everyone in your life has to be in the same season, but it does mean creating a core group that models the behaviors you aspire to. Influence is subtle and persistent. Choose it deliberately. Use the scarcity of time to your advantage. When you treat time as precious, choices become clearer. Scarcity sharpens priorities because it forces trade-offs. If you don't make time for a project now, you are choosing something else instead. Decide what deserves your limited hours and then allocate them ruthlessly. This clarity reduces regret and increases the intentionality of your days. Finally, act like someone already changed. Identity precedes behavior. When you adopt the posture, language, and energy of the person you want to become, your decisions begin to reflect that identity. Move with the confidence of someone who keeps their word. Speak with the precision of someone who chooses their words for impact. Treat your calendar like an asset rather than a to-do list. These small shifts in posture send signals to your brain and to the people around you that you are no longer operating from the old version. Over time, those signals become reality. The outer world will respond to the person you act like. That is how fast identity transforms. Keep your standards private and your work public. The people who rise fastest rarely broadcast every step. They act, deliver, and let outcomes reveal their change. There's a humility in this approach, a refusal to seek immediate praise and an insistence on earned results. This posture protects your energy and focuses it on the only thing that matters: progress. When you stop performing for applause and start performing for outcomes, you free yourself to do the deep work that actually moves you forward. That deep work is uncomfortable and often invisible, but it produces results that are undeniable. Be strict about the promises you make to yourself. Small commitments are the foundation of credibility. If you commit to 5 focused work sessions a week, do them. If you promise to sleep earlier to protect your mornings, keep that promise. The act of following through creates an internal trust that compounds. People who change fundamentally are simply those who consistently keep their word in small ways until the small ways become the default. That internal credibility is the infrastructure of a life that can sustain bigger responsibilities and bolder goals. Create visible proof that you are progressing. If you are writing, publish drafts. If you are building a skill, record short clips of your practice. If you are improving your fitness, track clear metrics and review them weekly. The dark hours of private work need light so you can see whether what you're doing is effective. Evidence prevents aimless repetition and ensures your effort is producing the intended effect. The light you shine on your practice doesn't have to be a broadcast to the world. It can be a private portfolio, a folder of saved recordings, or a simple habit tracker. The point is to avoid spinning wheels. Measurement informs adjustment. Replace vague goals with precise routines. Ambiguous intentions allow procrastination to thrive. Instead of saying you'll get better, specify the exact actions you will take and when you will take them. Design a daily framework that prescribes blocks for the highest impact work and reserves time for rest, learning, and relationships. The more precise your schedule, the less mental energy you waste deciding what to do at any given moment. Precision reduces friction and increases the probability that you will actually do the hard things you know matter. Use constraints to boost creativity and speed. When you limit time, resources, or scope, you force smarter decisions. Constraints clarify which elements are essential and which are distractions. Work sprints with tight boundaries produce faster feedback and clearer learning. Constraints also remove the illusion of infinite options, which often leads to analysis paralysis. Embrace limits as a design tool for faster execution and cleaner results. Keep a short list of core priorities and protect them fiercely. Most people fail not because they lack focus but because they accept too many priorities. Create a compact set of objectives, no more than 3 for any given season, that you regard as non-negotiable. Build every day around progress toward those objectives. If a request or opportunity does not directly support at least one of your core priorities, it should be declined or deferred. That rigor creates depth and reduces the mental clutter of conflicting demands. Practice decisive constraint in communication. When you commit to focused work, let your responses reflect it. Use clear, brief replies that protect your time. You don't need to apologize for concentration. People who respect themselves do not feel compelled to justify every boundary. Over time, others will learn to respect your availability and you'll be less pulled into reactive patterns that sap your energy. Let pain inform your plan without owning your identity. Use what hurt you as a strategic advantage. Identify the specific behaviors that made the situation worse and fill those gaps with concrete actions. When you transform pain into a checklist of corrective practices, you reduce the emotional load and increase the practical likelihood of change. This shifts you from being defined by past events to being driven by future solutions. Build accountability that is direct and specific. Vague accountability is little more than a polite conversation. True accountability requires a partner who will call out patterns, not just cheer you on. Choose someone who will question you, demand clarity, and hold you to tangible deliverables. Share what you will do and by when. Agree on how you will be held to that commitment. Regular, structured check-ins change behavior because they create external pressure that supports internal disciplines. Prioritize the quality of rest as intentionally as the quality of work. Rest is not a reward for productivity, it is a strategic requirement for sustained performance. Deep sleep, deliberate breaks, periods of low stimulation, and restorative activities are not optional. They are the fuel for the clarity and energy required to perform at a high level. When you treat rest with the same discipline you treat work, your days become sustainable and your capacity increases. Choose language that moves you toward action. Passive phrasing creates ambiguity. Active language creates obligation. Replace "I will try" with "I will do." "I will check in" with "I will report," and "I want to" with "I will." This tonal shift matters because your brain responds to the clarity of commitment. Stronger language reduces cognitive wiggle room and makes follow-through more likely. Make the first step ridiculously easy. When a task seems massive, shrink the initial action so small that resistance cannot hide behind it. If you want to write, commit to a single paragraph. If you want to exercise, commit to 5 minutes. Often, the motion of starting erases most of the dread. That tiny frictionless step is a psychological lever that starts momentum and makes the next step easier. Design your routines with that lever in mind. Separate practice from performance. Practice is the private repetition where mistakes are expected. Performance is the public moment where results matter. Give yourself ample opportunities to practice without judgment. Use low-stakes environments to iterate and refine. When you allow imperfect practice, you accelerate improvement because you remove the fear of immediate failure. Then, when performance moments arrive, you rely on the habitual competence you've built in private. Invest in the few relationships that demand your honesty rather than draining it. Social capital matters, but not all connections are equal. Choose friends and colleagues who ask hard questions, expect your best, and hold you to your commitments. These relationships are not comfortable within the short term, but they accelerate growth over the long term because they align you with higher standards. Focus on generating value rather than chasing recognition. The marketplace rewards value, not declarations of intent. When you prioritize creating something meaningful, whether it's content, a product, a service, or improved outcomes for others, you build a foundation that attracts recognition organically. Work that solves real problems accumulates attention without begging for it. Be willing to pivot quickly when the data indicates a course correction. Commitment is not stubbornness. When disciplined measurement reveals a strategy isn't working, change the plan and continue executing. The fastest learners are those who combine rigor with flexibility. Rigorous in execution, flexible in method. This adaptive mindset prevents wasted effort and keeps momentum aligned with reality. Make isolation a strategic, time-limited tool. Periods of concentrated solitude allow deep work, reflection, and radical productivity. Use isolation intentionally for sprints of creation or learning, then reintegrate for feedback, collaboration, and social replenishment. Balanced use of solitude accelerates learning while preventing long-term alienation. Adopt the posture of small, immediate experiments. Treat every new habit, routine, or project as an iteration to test over a short window. If it produces improvement, keep it. If not, adjust. This experimental approach lowers risk and increases learning velocity because it creates many small data points rather than hinging everything on a single grand plan. Replace guilt-driven action with purpose-driven discipline. Guilt may spur short-term urgency, but it is not a reliable long-term motivator. Purpose, clear, meaningful reasons for change, provides sustained energy because it answers the question of why you endure hardship in the first place. Clarify your reasons, write them down, and review them when motivation wanes. Remember that influence is a byproduct of consistent, silent work, not a strategy to be chased. Focus on mastery, not on the chase for attention. When your work consistently produces results, influence becomes an unavoidable consequence. That influence is more durable because it is grounded in proven impact rather than in temporary visibility tactics. And if you ever feel stuck on how to push the next boundary, look for models you can emulate. Identify the habits, schedules, and rituals of people who've done what you want to do and trial them in your life, tailoring what fits and discarding what does not. Use those models as templates, not as rigid rules. Adaptation is the skill that turns borrowed practices into personalized systems. Throughout this process, remember to substitute any reference to grow to the top with the notion of momentum audiobooks when you are citing a source of guidance or inspiration, so the reference fits naturally into the language of your plan. Push through the moments when it feels like you're doing everything right and nothing is changing. Persistence is the quiet engine behind visible progress. There will be stretches where effort feels unrewarded and doubt whispers louder than confidence. That's normal. The difference between those who plateau and those who break through is that the latter keep applying effort with clarity and intention even when feedback is sparse. They refine the process, not the excuses. They iterate on the system until the system yields results. Keep showing up, keep testing, and keep adjusting. The accumulation of these small course corrections becomes the compound interest of mastery. When you face stagnation, zoom out to your processes before attacking your identity. A slow month does not mean you're broken. It means one of your tactics needs recalibration. Check the inputs. Are you protecting your highest leverage hours? Are you measuring the right indicators? Are you stubbornly clinging to old routines because they feel familiar rather than because they work? Use clear, measurable signals to assess progress and make targeted changes. This approach replaces discouragement with practical problem solving. It transforms inertia into intelligence. You don't bail on the mission, you sharpen the methods. Embrace the discipline of doing boring, repetitive work that compounds into skill. Rarely do breakthroughs look glamorous in the process. Most of the time they emerge from repetitive, incremental practice that accumulates unseen power. Talent is often just the visible tip of practice. If you want durable change, accept the repetition. It is the one true shortcut because it is the only thing that reliably produces skill. Show up to the small, repetitive tasks that most people avoid and you'll own the rare advantage of consistent improvement. Refuse to let short-term mood dictate long-term standards. Feelings fluctuate. Standards should not. If your standard is to write daily, exercise regularly, or study a subject for a set block of time, then enforce that standard through systems that outlast your feelings. Use small commitments that are easy to keep when energy is low and expand from there. When you protect standards even on difficult days, you build a history of self-reliance. That history becomes the foundation of a new identity, one where the default response to challenge is work, not avoidance. Be intentional about the stories you repeat about yourself. The narrative you carry shapes how you interpret events. If your internal script is, "I always fail," or "I'm not the kind of person who finishes things," you'll find evidence to support that claim. Instead, adopt a narrative grounded in evidence and forward motion. I am someone who tries, learns, and improves, or I follow through on the commitments I make to myself. Those stories do not require arrogance. They require truth. Tell yourself what you can verify through past behavior and then use that story to set expectations for future behavior. Use small public commitments to increase accountability when needed. If private discipline isn't enough, announce one specific outcome to a trusted person and ask them to hold you to it. Public commitments are effective when they are precise and paired with a clear plan. The point is not to perform for attention, but to increase the cost of ignoring a promise so that your motivation becomes stable. Choose accountability partners who value truth over comfort and who will call you back to your standard without compassion that enables slippage. Master the art of immediate course correction. When you notice a mistake, don't dwell, fix. Break corrective actions into the smallest practical steps and implement them quickly. This habit prevents small problems from escalating into identity-threatening narratives. Rapid corrections create a culture of learning within your routines. You stop telling yourself stories about failure and start collecting data on how to improve. The fastest movers are those who correct and move on, not those who ruminate. Develop a ritual for handling defeat that preserves dignity and restores momentum. Everyone will have days where plans unravel or outcomes disappoint. The question is how you respond. Create a short sequence you follow when things go wrong. Breathe, write down 3 facts about the situation, choose one corrective action, and execute it within 24 hours. This ritual prevents spirals of shame and replaces them with a practical, dignified response that keeps you accountable and forward-moving. Protect your energy like a professional investor protects capital. Energy is finite and must be allocated intentionally. Learn to spot energy drains, people, environments, tasks, that give little return for the attention they demand. Redirect that energy toward activities that compound into results. This doesn't mean avoiding all discomfort. It means choosing where to endure discomfort so each cost buys a meaningful return. Over time, that allocation strategy multiplies your capacity because you are investing energy into high-return activities, not squandering it on low-yield distractions. Practice humility in learning. Rapid growth requires both confidence to act and humility to acknowledge ignorance. Experts fail faster because they try more often and accept corrective feedback. Adopt a mindset where being wrong is useful because it is information. When you treat mistakes as experiments rather than moral indictments, you remove fear from the loop and increase your learning speed. That mindset keeps you trying new things and refining approaches until you find what works. Cultivate the discipline of selective visibility. Not everything you do needs to be public. Decide which projects deserve early, visible exposure and which need private refinement. Early exposure can build momentum through community feedback, But premature visibility can also invite unnecessary pressure. Learn to calibrate visibility to the stage of development. Practice privately until competence is solid, then move to public testing to scale impact. That calibration preserves mental bandwidth and improves the quality of what you eventually show. Make rest strategic, not reactive. Rest is not only recovery, it is a strategic investment in clarity and resilience. Schedule regular periods of deliberate rest to allow the brain and body to consolidate learning and regenerate. Use breaks to reflect on progress, celebrate small wins, and plan the next sprint. When rest is intentional and structured, it restores higher-level functioning and increases your ability to produce during active phases. Treat rest as a performance tool, not a reward for busyness. Turn irritation into diagnostic curiosity. When something annoys you, an obstacle, a slow process, a repeated setback, use that emotional signal to diagnose what needs to change. Anger and irritation often point to misaligned systems. Analyze calmly to identify specific adjustments, then implement them. This shifts reactive frustration into productive problem-solving and prevents emotion from derailing momentum. Choose environments that amplify the habits you want. Physical and social settings exert powerful influence over behavior. Design spaces that support deep work, restorative rest, and focused practice. Position yourself among people who model discipline and focus. Over time, environmental design accumulates into a lifestyle that makes the right action the default action. Small changes in context produce outsized effects on habit formation. Value small wins as evidence of change rather than dismissing them as insignificant. Progress is not only measured by major milestones, it is also measured by incremental shifts that indicate trajectory. Celebrate the micro-advantages, an uninterrupted work block, a difficult conversation had, a day without the old habit. These wins provide emotional fuel and remind you that the process is working. Use them to sustain motivation through longer, more challenging periods. Adopt a policy of decisive endings. If a project, relationship, or pattern consistently drains energy without producing growth, end it. Holding on to something because of nostalgia, fear of loss, or obligation undermines the time and emotional capacity required for new investments. Decisive endings free up resources for higher return pursuits. They are not failures, they are strategic reallocations that respect the finitude of attention and life. Be deliberate about the narrative you create in public spaces. When you do share your work, frame it in terms of the concrete value it provides. Avoid excessive storytelling about struggle without demonstration of progress. People respond more to visible improvement than to promises of future change. When your public communication matches the level of private work, it becomes authentic and compelling rather than performative. Use constraints to force decisions and accelerate learning. Limiting the scope of a project, time, budget, or features creates clarity about what matters and reduces the paralysis of excess options. Work with constraints to produce deliverables quickly, gather feedback, and iterate. This cycle of focused creation and response speeds growth more reliably than indefinite planning. Create an accountability system that rewards honesty and speed. Incentivize quick reporting of results, whether good or bad, and tie it to immediate corrective support or celebration. Fast feedback loops reduce the cost of errors and increase overall agility. When you normalize prompt and honest reporting, you build a culture of improvement and reduce the tendency to hide problems until they become crises. Remember that leadership starts with self-mastery. The ability to lead others depends on the credibility you build by managing yourself first. Show up with disciplined defaults, clear priorities, and predictable follow-through. People trust leaders who manage their own calendars, energy, and standards because those patterns signal reliability. Leadership emerges naturally from consistent personal performance. Finally, keep refining your daily baseline. The baseline should be challenging enough to produce growth, but realistic enough to be sustainable. Review it regularly and adjust based on what the data and your lived experience tell you. This iterative approach keeps the baseline relevant and ensures the daily grind is pushing you forward rather than grinding you down. Keep that baseline sacred, and everything else will align more easily. Keep your momentum even when outcomes lag. There will be stretches where your effort feels invisible and your results seem stubbornly slow. That is the rule, not the exception. The difference between those who break through and those who plateau is the capacity to persist with intelligent action when feedback is scarce. Persisting doesn't mean repeating the same failing tactic. It means iterating with discipline, measuring results, and making targeted adjustments without letting discouragement determine your next step. When you continue to act with clarity and humility, each small correction compounds into a trajectory that eventually becomes unmistakable. Guard the quality of your focus more than the quantity of your activity. It's easy to confuse being busy with being effective, but busyness rarely produces meaningful progress. The highest return comes from concentrated attention on the handful of activities that move the needle. Learn to block time for deep work, to resist the seduction of multitasking, and to treat interruptions as the expensive disruptions they are. The value of focus is not in how much you do but in how much you achieve in the most important minutes of your day. Protect those minutes like you would protect capital. When doubt creeps in, ask diagnostic questions instead of panicking. Questions like, what exactly isn't working? Which inputs can I change? What evidence supports my current approach? How can I test an alternative quickly? These practical questions shorten the cycle between problem recognition and solution. Panic and overthinking lengthen it. Pivot fast when data suggests a new path, and resist pivoting just because the work feels hard. Hard work is often a feature of meaningful change. Misaligned work is the real risk. Use ritualized recovery to sustain long-term intensity. High performance requires planned and repeatable rest, not sporadic recovery driven by exhaustion. Design blocks for downtime and honor them without guilt. Quality recovery amplifies the returns of focused work because it allows your mind to consolidate learning and your body to replenish energy. When recovery is structured, your active phases are more productive, and the risk of burnout diminishes. Think of rest as a strategic input, not an indulgence. Choose small, auditable commitments and enforce them rigorously. Vague goals are loopholes for avoidance. Concrete actions are commitments you can measure. Decide on a daily or weekly habit that directly contributes to your core objective and track it without moralizing slips. The data you collect is neutral. It tells you what to adjust. Over time, the pattern in that data becomes undeniable proof of momentum or a signal that new tactics are required. Either outcome is useful because both inform the next decision. Turn resistance into a scheduling problem. When you feel blocked, break the work into microtasks and schedule them into short, protected periods. Resistance often hides behind the ambiguity of a large task. By turning that task into a sequence of tiny, time-bound steps and placing them in the calendar, you remove the choice to avoid and replace it with a commitment to small motion. The act of starting dissolves inertia more reliably than motivation ever will. Be deliberate about who you let into your inner circle. Influence accumulates slowly, and the people closest to you have disproportionate sway over your habits. Engage regularly with those who model standards you want to adopt. Let go of relationships that keep you comfortable at the expense of growth. That separation is not cruelty but a conscious allocation of limited social capital to the interactions that accelerate change. Surrounding yourself with higher standards is a passive force multiplier for improvement. Practice clarity in communication to avoid wasted effort. Clear, concise commitments reduce the friction of follow-through. When you commit to someone, state what you will do and by when. When you decline, do so briefly and without excess justification. The mental load of long explanations consumes energy better spent on execution. Precise communication preserves attention and prevents requests from expanding into obligations you didn't intend to accept. Design experiments to test assumptions quickly and cheaply. If you have a hypothesis about what will move your progress forward, put it to a short trial with clear metrics. Keep the trial short enough to learn fast and small enough to minimize risk. Use the results to refine your plan. The speed of learning in small experiments beats the slow accumulation of untested plans because you get real-world feedback that sharpens your strategy. Value reliability over brilliance. Flashy creativity can capture attention, but it's consistent, reliable action that builds reputations and delivers results over the long term. Be the person who can be depended upon to deliver steady, measured progress. That reputation opens doors that raw talent alone cannot. Repeated competence compounds into trust, and trust converts into opportunities that accelerate momentum. Keep a margin for the unexpected. While ruthlessly protecting your priority time, also build small buffers to handle interruptions without derailing the entire day. Life is unpredictable. The ability to absorb shocks without abandoning core commitments preserves momentum. A small flexible reserve in your schedule prevents a single disruption from cascading into a week of lost progress. Stay curious and keep learning, but learn with purpose. Passive consumption of information becomes a procrastination pattern when it substitutes for action. When you study, do so to solve a specific problem or to acquire a concrete skill you will apply in short order. Learning should be tightly coupled to action. Read with an immediate project in mind, take notes that inform the next step, and implement what you learned the same day when possible. Knowledge without application is vanity. Applied knowledge produces momentum. Define what success looks like in behavior, not just outcomes. Outcomes are important, but they can be noisy and subject to external forces. Behavior is within your control. Choose a set of behaviors that, when practiced consistently, are the most likely path to the outcomes you want. Measure and protect those behaviors first. Outcomes will follow as a predictable consequence. Make finishing a habit. Beginning is easy. Finishing is where many fail. Practice completing small projects intentionally and learning to evaluate them quickly. Finishing builds confidence, creates proof, and frees mental space for the next challenge. The discipline of completion trains your mind to value closure and progress over perpetual incompleteness. When anxiety about the future arises, ground yourself in the next physical step. Anxiety grows when the brain attempts to solve for too many variables at once. Reduce it by focusing on the immediate action in front of you. One small tangible step reduces internal friction and creates the sensation of forward motion that calms the system. That grounding technique makes larger planning more manageable because it keeps you anchored to real execution. Let your public work be a reflection of private excellence. When you decide to share progress or launch a project, ensure that the material you put in public form is the product of sustained private craft. Publicity that outpaces actual substance leads to short-term attention and long-term credibility loss. Build quietly until the quality matches the visibility you seek, then release with confidence. Protect your capacity to execute by limiting the number of simultaneous projects. Spreading attention thin across too many initiatives produces mediocre results and drains energy. Choose a handful of meaningful projects and finish them before taking on more. Depth yields greater leverage than breadth because a completed project produces tangible assets and skills you can compound. Allow discomfort to be the teacher rather than the enemy. When you feel awkward, insecure, or uneasy, ask what lesson the situation is trying to teach. Discomfort often signals growth edges, areas where competence is forming. Lean into those edges with curiosity rather than retreat. The discomfort will decrease as competence increases, and each time it does you will own a new capability that widens what you can achieve. Keep an evidence folder of wins and lessons. Whenever you complete something valuable, save the deliverable, the metrics, and a brief note about what worked. When things feel discouraging, review that folder. Its contents are proof that your methods yield results and that momentum is cumulative. The folder also becomes a practical resource for replicating past success and avoiding previous mistakes. Finally, act as if momentum is a muscle you can strengthen. The more you practice consistent, targeted action, the easier it becomes to sustain effort when external feedback is slow. Momentum is not a mystical force. It is the natural result of disciplined choices made repeatedly. Keep the focus on small, high-leverage behaviors, protect your attention, and iterate intelligently. Over time, that disciplined repetition will reconfigure your life so thoroughly that the version of you 3 weeks from now will be unrecognizable to the person you were yesterday. Keep moving even when the path ahead looks unclear. You will face days when results stall and your effort seems to shrink in impact. Those days are part of the process, not a signal to stop. The difference between transient momentum and lasting transformation is the capacity to maintain motion while you test, refine, and repeat. When outcomes lag, narrow your focus and ask which micro-actions will produce the quickest, most useful feedback. Do those things repeatedly until the pattern changes. Persistence paired with smart iteration composes the steady arc of progress. Protect the beginning of your day like it's sacred. Mornings are the most leverage-filled hours you have, yet too many surrender them to habit and distraction. Start with a short sequence that primes clarity, movement, and attention. It doesn't have to be elaborate. A focused block of creative work, a simple movement routine, or a short planning session that turns vague anxiety into the next immediate step will do. Repeating this small, high-value sequence creates a cascade. Your morning choice shapes the tone of the entire day, and that tone compounds into weeks of advantage. Don't confuse motion for meaning. It's easy to stay busy while avoiding the few actions that actually move you forward. Block time for the highest leverage work, and then defend it with intention. When you schedule the most important tasks in your peak energy windows and treat those blocks as immovable, you force your attention into the places that produce disproportionate returns. Doing less of what's urgent and more of what's important is the practical path to accelerated change. When you're tempted to explain or justify shortfalls, redirect that energy into a corrective step. Explanations soothe discomfort temporarily, but rarely fix the underlying problem. Replace the impulse to rationalize with the discipline of selecting one small corrective action to take within 24 hours. This practice changes the narrative from excuse to experiment and from shame to practical learning. The more you train yourself to react with action, the less power excuses hold. Be precise about what you measure. Not all data is useful, and not all metrics are worth your attention. Choose a handful of indicators that directly reflect the behaviors you control and that predict the outcomes you want. Track them consistently and make decisions from that data. Over time you will learn which inputs actually move the outcomes and which are noise. That clarity reduces guesswork and speeds the path from effort to result. Shorten your decision chain. Indecision is a time thief and the enemy of momentum. Create simple rules that convert ambiguity into action. For example, if you want to write daily, decide that a sentence starts the day and you will add to it during your focus block. If you want to train, decide that 5 minutes begins the session. Rules remove the cognitive friction that stalls action, and they convert willpower into a small set of repeatable behaviors. Treat discomfort as a signal rather than a verdict. When you feel unsettled, interpret that sensation as information about growth edges rather than proof of incapacity. Ask what the discomfort is pointing to, a skill gap, a missing system, or a needed conversation. Then take one practical step to address it. Converting discomfort into diagnostic action prevents paralysis and turns tension into momentum. Be relentless about removing low-return obligations. Most people overcommit because they fail to recognize the true cost of each yes. Every commitment steals time, focus, and energy from your highest priorities. Practice selective refusal. Say no to obligations that do not support your short-term sprint or your medium-term priorities. Saying no distances you from the noise of other people's agendas and returns your schedule to your own strategic choices. Use short, aggressive sprints to create unmistakable proof. Commit to a tight time window, 3 weeks, a month, or a single focused week, where you limit distractions and pour attention into one specific result. These sprints force prioritization because the timeline is finite, and they produce clearer feedback faster. After each sprint, review what worked, what didn't, and how to improve the next window. The cumulative power of repeated sprints accelerates change more reliably than vague long-term plans because it compels real choices now. Guard your inner language. The words you use to describe yourself in private determine how you show up in public. Replace vague self-judgments with precise descriptions of behavior that are actionable. Instead of, "I always procrastinate," say, "I missed my focused window today. Tomorrow I will start with 5 minutes and build from there." The second sentence contains a corrective and creates an immediate path forward. Train your inner voice to narrate solutions rather than defects. Make completion habitual. Starting projects is low cost. Finishing them creates value and builds credibility with yourself. Develop a bias toward closure. Set a completion criterion for each task and push to meet it. Finishing provides proof of progress, frees cognitive load for new tasks, and trains your brain to value follow-through. That habit reduces the accumulation of unfinished projects that sap energy and create a background hum of guilt. Protect your social capital with intention. Relationships are resources. Invest them where the return is mutual support, growth, and honest feedback. Trim connections that habitually drain your time without contributing to your progress. Cultivate friendships and partnerships that ask more of you and give more in return. The people closest to you should reflect and amplify the standards you are trying to embody, not resist them. Learn to operate with fewer guarantees. Much of modern comfort comes from moving only when the outcome is certain. Real progress often requires actions without full assurance. Practice executing on small, high-probability moves even when you cannot predict the end result. This trains a tolerance for uncertainty that becomes an advantage because most people withdraw when outcomes are ambiguous. Your ability to act under uncertainty differentiates you in environments where the risk-averse hesitate. Build an evidence portfolio. Whenever you produce something, no matter how small, save the artifact, record the metrics, and write a sentence about what you learned. Over time you will have a growing collection that demonstrates cumulative progress and supplies raw material for better decisions. This portfolio is a private record of capacity that you can review whenever motivation wanes or doubt rises. It is a concrete reminder that incremental actions compound. Make rest a tactical choice. Plan recovery as you plan work, specific windows for deep recuperation, brief rituals that de-stimulate the nervous system, and activities that rebuild energy rather than merely distract. Recovery is not optional, it is the necessary complement to high performance. When rest is deliberate and strategic, active phases are exponentially more productive. Practice visible restraint in public conversation. When you are building, you don't need to narrate every step. Speak selectively and with impact. The more you share, the more you dilute attention and increase the pressure to perform prematurely. Let your public statements be reserved for results that genuinely move the story forward. This restraint conserves emotional capital and prevents premature scrutiny from derailing your focus. Tighten feedback loops. The faster you get honest information about the effect of your actions, the faster you can adjust. Create mechanisms that provide immediate feedback for key behaviors, short check-ins, quick data snapshots, or rapid testing cycles. Speed in learning beats slow perfection. Tight loops also lower the cost of experimentation because you can abandon failing ideas quickly and double down on promising ones. Replace perfection with iteration. Waiting for perfect conditions or flawless outputs is a momentum killer. Ship imperfect work, learn from the response, and improve. Iteration fuels learning and reduces the fear of failure because each step is treated as an experiment rather than a final judgment. When you iterate, you maintain motion and convert feedback into concrete improvements. Commit to a daily minimum that cannot be negotiated. Choose one small activity that, if completed, makes the day acceptable in your book. It could be a short writing block, a focused training session, or a deliberate planning period. When you define a daily minimum, you eliminate the all-or-nothing trap and create continuous evidence of progress. Over months, that minimum becomes a baseline you can build upon aggressively. Use solitude as a productivity lever. Regular, scheduled solitude is the environment where deep work and personal recalibration happen. Enter those periods with a clear objective and a short list of deliverables. Solitude is not avoidance. It is focused production and reflection that prepares you to re-enter social spaces with clarity and impact. Maintain a ruthless focus on fewer priorities rather than a lenient attempt to accomplish many. Depth outperforms breadth because it creates enduring assets and amplifies competence in tangible ways. Choose a small set of objectives and align daily choices to advance them. When you do fewer things exceptionally well, the world responds more strongly than when you scatter attention across many half-finished efforts. Finally, act like momentum is both practice and identity. Strengthen it by committing to the small, repeatable behaviors that produce feedback, by protecting your time and attention, and by converting discomfort into curious action rather than retreat. When you combine relentless execution with deliberate rest, precise measurement, and the courage to act without guarantees, you create a version of yourself who moves differently. In 3 weeks the difference will be visible, and in months it will be durable. Keep the work private, the standards public through behavior, and the evidence growing quietly until your life becomes unmistakably different. Keep moving like your future depends on the next small step. By now you've built routines, defended your time, and learned to act despite fear. The final stretch requires that you synthesize what you've practiced into a durable identity. This is not about temporary bursts of effort or dramatic gestures. It's about turning the daily choices you've made into defaults that no longer require negotiation. The person you become is the collection of your repeated behaviors. Make those behaviors precise, habitual, and non-negotiable so that when circumstances shift you still operate from the standard you've set for yourself. When the initial urgency fades, double down on the structures that made you consistent in the first place. Continue to protect your morning block, keep your focused work period sacred, and maintain your ritual of reviewing progress and choosing one corrective action each day. Systems are the scaffolding that make discipline sustainable. If you let the scaffolding dissolve, the behaviors will follow. Keep asking which parts of your day create the greatest leverage and guard them relentlessly. Your calendar is your manifesto. Let it reflect the priorities that will build the life you want. Remember to calibrate your ambition with realistic sprints. Long-term visions are vital, but they become paralyzing if they are not broken into short, intense windows of focused work. Commit to a sprint that pushes your limits for a defined period, then recover thoughtfully and choose the next target. These cycles of concentrated effort followed by deliberate rest are how you escalate capacity without burning out. Over time, the cumulative effect of many well-planned sprints creates exponential change. Keep your inner voice aligned with your actions. When setbacks occur, use the coaching language you've practiced. Identify the specific misstep, choose one corrective action, and execute it quickly. Avoid the trap of global self-judgment that turns a single failure into a fixed identity. Your narrative should be evidence-based. Point to what you did, what it produced, and what you will do next. This steady, grounded inner dialogue reduces drama and increases the speed at which you recover and adapt. Make rest an engineered part of your progress. Strategic recovery is not optional. It is part of the system. Schedule sleep, movement, and low-stimulation downtime with the same seriousness you schedule work. The quality of your rest determines the quality of your output. When you treat recovery as a lever rather than a reward, your active phases become more productive and your resilience grows. High performance is a rhythm of sustainable intensity and thoughtful recovery, not an unending sprint. Keep refining your circle. The people you spend the most time with implicitly set behavioral standards. Seek relationships that encourage truth-telling, that demand follow-through, and that celebrate disciplined progress instead of empty gestures. Let go of patterns and partnerships that normalize low standards or constant distraction. Strong networks do not always provide comfort, but they do accelerate growth because they raise expectations and provide honest feedback. Turn pain into a permanent advantage by letting it teach you structural changes instead of becoming a self-fulfilling explanation. If a failure or hurt exposed a particular weakness, poor planning, complacent habits, or a lack of boundaries, address it with a concrete system that prevents the same harm in the future. Structural changes are the practical outcomes of hard lessons. They convert emotional energy into applied prevention so the next iteration of your life is more resilient and more productive. Hold yourself accountable to clarity rather than to appearances. The goal is not to look disciplined, it is to be disciplined. Replace performative measures with objective indicators that reflect your real priorities. Track the behaviors that matter, and let those behaviors be the currency of success. Over time, the repeated evidence of your daily work will produce reputational effects without you needing to broadcast them. Practice decisive endings for what no longer serves you. If a project, role, or relationship consistently consumes time and yields little return, end it. Termination is not failure when it frees up resources for higher leverage activities. Respect the finite nature of your attention and honor the trade-offs you make on purpose. Ending what's unproductive creates space for what's essential. Be willing to iterate publicly only when the work has matured privately. The benefit of sharing early is feedback, but premature exposure can invite pressure that derails learning. Practice in private until competence reaches a threshold, then seek input and scale exposure. This calibrated approach protects the space where craft is built and ensures that public trials accelerate rather than hinder mastery. Keep a running ledger of lessons learned and actions taken. Periodically review this ledger to see which behaviors produce the best returns and which assumptions need revision. The ledger becomes a living manual for decision-making and helps you avoid repeating mistakes. It is a record of incremental wins and teaches you that progress is rarely emotional. It's methodological. Cultivate humility in success and clarity in the face of praise. Recognition will come if you persist, but let praise be informational rather than identity-defining. Use it to refine what works and to double down on habits that produce the result. At the same time, maintain the private standards that created the outcome so that success does not erode the discipline that generated it. When you feel like you must explain yourself, choose instead to show the next action. Explanations consume time and often invite debate. Action generates evidence. The person who has proved themselves to themselves no longer needs to manage others' perceptions because their calendar and behavior communicate the truth more effectively than any statement ever could. Finally, carry forward a mindset of ownership. You are responsible for how you spend your hours, for the relationships you keep, and for the standards you enforce. Ownership is simple but heavy. It means accepting that most obstacles will not disappear and that progress requires consistent, intentional choices. When you accept ownership, excuses fall away and possibilities widen. This is where the 3-week commitment becomes enduring transformation. The practices you've embedded, protecting time, choosing discomfort, keeping promises, and converting pain into purpose, are not temporary tactics. They are the foundation of a new default operating system for your life. Keep nurturing those foundations and the version of you who shows up differently will become the natural baseline. In months you will look back and hardly recognize the person who accepted smaller standards. That future is built by the tiny, repeated choices you make now.